Hi, my name is Joe,
And my name is Mrinalini.
and we are the producers of Transform.
Transform is an open source, accessible, self pedagogical tool shedding light on the scope of violence faced by trans people in India and by extension South Asia. But it took us a while to get here.
So, the story of Transform goes back to 2020 when I reached out to Mrinalini and asked her to join me in a project to understand structural violence against trans people. From the framework of a thing called the rape culture pyramid, which I was very familiar with, which is a popular pedagogical tool. We wanted to create a similar tool to sort of, like an infographic like thing that can do the same to understand how the same kind of structural violence affects trans people, and how, for example, microaggressions, transphobic jokes, and smaller covert transmisogynistic and transphobic actions lead to larger violent actions like the destruction of livelihood and of life.
So essentially, Transform started off as a simple short term project that would end within a couple of days. But
When we began, the first issue we faced was that we felt like using a pyramid, and the concepts, or a single Instagram post was reductive to the magnitude of the violence that we were trying to map and trying to connect together. Um, so we also felt that the issues we faced as folks from the community and through the experiences of our friends, we felt like an infographic was not enough, especially when it just spoke about one trans community, because we are not a monolith, and it's impossible to talk about the issues and the violence against all members of the trans community because there is no one trans community. So we just started an Excel sheet like normal people.
so our Google Sheet looked at as many trans social groups as we could think of and had friends from. This included trans people belonging to religious minorities, belonging to Dalit and oppressed castes, living in military zones, in sex work, and so many more.
I guess we thought of so many and we just put all of them down, and we put down the violence that each of these groups go through.
We took inspiration from the current rape culture pyramid and divided the different types of violence and other transmisogynistic behaviors into three broad categories of normalization, degradation, and assault.
They had these three categorizations which absolutely make sense, and it talks about the violence, in not a linear fashion, but in three categories that can be connected very easily and understood easily.
But to ensure that it was relevant to the lives and experiences of trans people, we decided to add some transmisogynistic behaviors and acts of violence by ourselves. Some of them were pretty similar to what already exists in the rape culture pyramid.
The others were a lot more specific to how some trans people experience it because of their specific identity.
So we had a long and hard look at our Excel sheet, which by this point had over a dozen trans social groups and categories of violence, and we realized a pyramid or infographics like structure was just not going to be enough and was going to end up being way too reductive. And so we had our great epiphany of creating a website.
We weren't sure whether we were doing anything right at this point. So what we did was what we knew to do. We called a lot of our friends and asked them to check this Google sheet to see whether it made sense and it was worth taking forward, carrying forward, doing more work on. And 30 trans people reviewed that Google sheet and made the information on Transform as varied as it could possibly be. And today, the reason why we have done what we have done and the reason why we are able to add so much more information to Transform is simply because those 30 reviewers told us that it was worth doing. And because of the 30 trans people that came on board, we started applying for grants because we really wanted to pay them. And for the emotional and other labor that they did for the tool, it's a lot of work to be reviewing a tool that solely talks about violence, especially when you are the person that the violence is being done to.
Keeping in mind that the tool is a hub of violent occurrences and can be potentially very triggering or traumatic, Joe and I emphasized on having consent and trigger tools from the beginning, as well as just other tools that bring the controls into the hands of each user from the beginning, every step of the way. This culminated in us having multiple content warnings as well as a dedicated trigger toolkit which has grounding techniques, pet videos, and playlists that are available to anyone who might need them.
So, obviously, at some point, we thought that a lot of the work on Transform is very heavy, very triggering, and sad. There's a lot of sad stuff that is happening. But we are also constantly reminded to move forward to the trans siblings that do the work that they do despite the kind of violence they face. And we see examples of this on an everyday basis in our own communities. And to highlight this, we thought that we should create a page called Affirmative Action. And this is a space where work is being done for the community, by the community. Probably like also through fundraisers that need people's support and mutual aid things, and just like, because obviously after you see a lot of the work and the work that we have done and the violence we have mapped, there is going to be a feeling of, oh no, there's so much bad things happening, so what now, what do I do next? And it was to not counter but to like sort of act on that what to do next kind of feeling that we wanted to just highlight the cool work that is being done by the community despite the violence that they face, and also the resources that you can use.
We also want to acknowledge that Transform is not the first project that aims at archiving these evidences, experiences, and narratives. Trans people have been doing it themselves in their own way for ages, be it through oral history, through storytelling, through blog posts, and so on. It's just that these mediums are often considered informal or not legitimate enough for various formal platforms or for research. And this is especially exaggerated when these narratives exist in vernacular languages. So, to tackle this, in addition to our English recommended reading, we have created a dedicated vernacular archives page which aims at being an exhaustive list of work by trans people, of course, about violence, but also their lives, about trans joy, and just everything else.
Over time, we wanted to involve as many people from the community as possible, and in whatever form possible. So it started with the reviewers that I just told you about, and the future funding then enabled us to hire 3 trans research assistants, and also a web developer who is and has developed our website.
And we're hoping to create a lot more opportunities and work with many, many more people belonging to the community in the future.
So yeah, this is it. This is a triangle that became a complicated web page that we are proud of, and also hoped that we never had to create in the first place.
If you would like to add, subtract, multiply the work we are doing in any way, please get in touch with us. Ways to do so are all over our website and our social media handles.
We hope our work here is useful in as many ways as possible to improve the conditions in which trans people are living across the world. And we just want to thank you for your support.